Endgames, Apocalypse, Ragnarok. There is actually a non-zero chance that the ATF may disappear, at least the way that most of us think about it. And by that, I'm talking about Waco, and I'm talking about the activities that impact otherwise ordinary folks, as well as their canine best friends, who are not out there trafficking narcotics, knocking off banks, liquor stores, that kind of stuff. There's been an insane amount of things that has happened since Trump has become president again, especially if we start looking at the ramp up over the last week. In this video, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be explaining how these pieces fit together in a short, concise, plain English so that you can follow how I'm looking at this math. And also, what is the Trojan horse that needs to be gutted to ensure that things don't come back and bite us in the butt later on? So guys, let's get into it. All right, so let's do some quick hits to kind of refresh your memory and cover the relevant, or at least the most relevant points. Trump sworn into office. Week 1, he retasks swaths of the ATF and DEA to redirect many of their boots on the ground assets, so special agents and so forth, who might ordinarily be knocking on your door or my door if we did something crazy, like purchase, I don't know, multiple handguns at the same time, triggering ATF form 3310.4. That's the multiple handgun purchase form, which maybe you didn't know about, but believe me, it's out there. And instead, they have rerouted their efforts to immigration enforcement as well as some other areas. Then Kash Patel is the acting head of the ATF. That happened last week. Now, there's a very great video by Mark Smith, Four Boxes Diner, that I encourage you to check out if you really want to get nerdy into the weeds on it. What I'm going to be doing here is I'm just going to be covering the broad strokes of what we need to so you understand how these pieces go together. But I'll see if I can get that linked in the description box below after this video is up so that you can go check that out. By Kash Patel being confirmed by the Senate, the United States Senate, to become the head of the FBI, that means that he's now a special kind of cookie. He's no longer a mere mortal like you or I. He has now been confirmed by the Senate. Why is that relevant? Mr. Patel no longer has to deal with a lot of the legal pushback and challenges, which, rest assured, anti-gunners both in and outside of the government may try to mount in court to whatever he chooses to do as acting head of the ATF. Why? Because an acting head of the ATF is not the same if they have not been confirmed by the Senate. Just there are legalistic, nitty-gritty arguments that basically push back on some of their decisions and some of the basically the power and what they wind up doing as acting head. But since Mr. Patel has gone through the Senate confirmation process, he in essence gets a pass because he's been moved from one side of the line to the other. Okay, that's just the very broad strokes of that. Another important thing too is that he's no longer set on an artificially short timeline. Ordinarily, acting heads may have about a 1 year or so time horizon. By having been pushed to the other side of the fence and having been confirmed by the Senate, he now should arguably, strongly arguably, get through that hurdle as well. And by the way, I'm just going to call it right now, Brandon Herrera for Deputy Director of ATF. You heard it here first. So with their policing powers stripped, it seems that the ATF could be exclusively refocused on dealing with things like licensing and approvals. There's a little bit more. I'm going to get to that in just a second. Now, in the firearm world, when we're talking about licensing and approvals, what we're talking about are things like dealing with federal firearms license dealers, FFLs. We're talking about dealing with the Title II NFA registry, so machine guns, suppressors, short barrel rifles, AOWs, DDs, SBRs, all that other kind of good stuff, okay? There's also the Science and Technology Division. So these are the folks who basically make the call of ball or strike about what is an SBR, what is a machine gun, what is a pistol versus a rifle, and so forth. So any time that some sort of inventor in the 2A space comes up with a new device that could impact the classification of a firearm. So for instance, should this particular new muzzle device, should this run afoul of the suppressor laws? So is this a suppressor? Even though we can look at it and say, yeah, this isn't. Well, you know, the ATF, let's just say, has a bit of a checkered history when it comes to making I don't know, insane decisions and things like that, as well as cross-checking back on themselves and so forth, and changing retroactively what they've done. We've documented an awful lot of that here on this channel. So bottom line is that if you're going to be inventing new things in the Second Amendment space, it is by no means stupid or crazy to basically run those through the Science and Technology Division to at least get a piece of paper that for now, says that, hey, you're okay manufacturing this, distributors are okay distributing it, retailers are okay retailing it, and customers are okay purchasing and possessing and using. So in other words, no more accidental felonies. Of course, until ATF changes their mind and then everything's a felony. But different story for another day. That's the Science and Technology Division. So guys, really quickly, don't forget to hit that like button. We've got a brand new quote of the day writer coming up at the very end. I'm interested in hearing your feedback in the comment section about that. And I am super interested in hearing what do you think is going to happen to all this down in the comment field section down below. Is this going to wind up so much worse or so much better than where we have been at with the ATF 5-10 years from now? What are your major concerns? What are your goalposts for victory? Share it up. Let me know. I do talk to lots of interesting people out there who maybe have some access to be able to change some things, let's say. If there's a great idea, I'm more than happy to pass that along. Let me know, and let's get back to the episode. What are some of the dominoes yet to fall? So in other words, what are some things that we need to have happen in order to basically clear out the ATF? Well, ATF, alcohol, tobacco, firearms. There's also a silent E at the end most of you forget about or don't know about, which is explosives, BATFE. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Explosives, as well as firearms, could actually get rolled into the FBI or one of the other many sub-agencies and agencies that are out there. I don't know, DHS, for instance, in order to regulate those sorts of things. Here's the big Trojan horse I'm worried about. And I'm going to tell you something crazy that an anti-gunner group, the Giffords campaign, already came up with. The Trojan horse is this. People don't like the ATF for a handful of incredibly valid reasons. I already talked about one of them, which is their propensity for changing their mind on things and screwing over a lot of people in the process. That's definitely number one. Problem, doesn't matter what agency you're talking about, they can all basically be weaponized to do this. So I don't see dissolving the ATF as necessarily a workaround to this. However, maybe there's more of a culture for the fact that they're okay with screwing people over that hopefully other different agencies will be less okay with. So that's one issue. Second issue is you get to insane enforcement activities. A lot of different controversies out there to choose from. All the jokes about shooting dogs, all the different jokes about Waco, just you name it, okay? Not getting into it, but Fast and Furious being one that personally pisses me off. That was when they were deliberately allowing firearms to go to the cartels who use them to murder people. Google it, not a chemtrail conspiracy theorist. This is like very real stuff. So they've got, at best, a questionable, at worst, downright disastrous track record on a lot of these enforcement decisions and issues that have been out there. Okay, so again, hopefully, if the ATF is dissolved, these are issues that live within the ATF consciousness and will not migrate with them. All right, so what is a third aspect that's out there? We're left talking about the fact that we've got a lot of administrative code about dealing with, hey, what's a pistol versus a rifle? What's a machine gun versus not? What's a frame receiver? What all of these different rule-making abilities that are out there. And let's be clear, at some point in the future, there will be an anti-gunner in the White House. At some point when that happens, they will be doing their utmost best to re-weaponize the process and procedures that have pissed so many of us off about the ATF. I'm not talking about one or two, I'm talking about number 3 right now. The last 24 months being a crystal clear example of pistol braces, suddenly that's a felony after it wasn't, and all this other kind of stuff. Who has that decision-making ability, and what can we do to check that? A lot of the checking of that power has come through the courts. We've seen attacks on the Chevron doctrine. That's the doctrine that's out there that the United States Supreme Court took a hatchet to that gives enormous sweeping discretionary abilities to the 434, off the top of my head, federal agencies and sub-agencies to be making calls that arguably, and of course if it does, then we can get a judge to agree with it, if they wind up contradicting or exceeding the statutory given authority by Congress, then it can be taken out. That is my concern, because it's going to get re-weaponized. There's going to be some agency who's going to have that ability. And I hope that wherever that ability goes to rest is the most cautious anti-political group who will be the most difficult for anti-gunners to leverage, to activate, and to weaponize. That is the Trojan horse that I'm specifically concerned about. And let's be clear, the anti-gunners, if you did not already know this, have no problem distorting the truth. As an example, in response to all this, a Giffords executive director had this little dandy of a quote. Quote, "Let's be clear, the ATF is the only federal law enforcement agency that exists to stop violent crime." Okay, I added the only, but otherwise they did have an only federal law enforcement agency. So I guess try not to take that personally, FBI, DEA, Department of Homeland Security, and others. In fact, just to unpack what a tenuous relationship anti-gunners have with truth, evidence, and statistics, I actually used this super secret tool that evidently the Giffords campaign doesn't have access to. I'm going to share that tool with you right now because this is pretty cool. I've been using it for a while. You should know about this. It's called Google. So I used this super secret tool and found the following information. As of 2020, there were approximately 137,000 full-time federal personnel authorized to make arrests and or carry firearms in all 50 states plus DC. Roughly half of those people work for the Department of Homeland Security, about 30% for DOJ. 68% of those 137,000 officers have what's described as a primary function of criminal investigation or enforcement, another 9% for police response and patrol. 25% were allocated to corrections, and if you're doing that at home math, I understand you add all those things up, 68, 9, 25, we get to 102. Don't worry about this. This is government math. I didn't come up with those numbers, the government did. So there are around 105,000, if we add up 9%, plus 68%. So we're dealing with 77% of the 137,000 officers equals 105,000 and change, whose primary responsibility is either police response and or criminal enforcement. But wait, wouldn't Giffords executives still be correct if, hey, the ATF employs all 105,000 of those people? Tom, close the loop. All right, get this. I used Google again. And according to the ATF, as of fiscal year 2023, they had 5,281 full-time employees, of which 2,597 were special agents. So the ATF accounts for approximately, do the math, 2,597 divided by 105,000 and change, about 2.4% of the officers who are out there. And again, these are just the federal law enforcement officers. That means that the anti-gunner executive was only wrong by a margin of error of 97.6%. That's a lot of wrong. But unfortunately, that is the pattern. That is the track record. That is what we are up against. And that is why I'm worried about the fact that if indeed we are going to see a massive realignment of not only the ATF as an agency, regardless of what happens to that, whether it gets destroyed, scrapped, significantly gutted, whatever, but there are certain organs within the ATF, and those organs, perhaps combined with that culture of the ATF, that's really what we're up against when we're talking about protecting the Second Amendment for us, our children, and our grandchildren. Where those organs go, how they are put into place as far as being protected from future activation, abuse, weaponization, that is going to be the Trojan horse that, from the long term, will determine whether or not this was success or if this was failure. Because after all, if 10 years from now, this goes to a different, let's say it goes to the FBI, or this goes to DHS, this goes to some other agency, don't know, don't care. But if this all winds up getting 10 times worse than what we've been used to, this may have been a great effort and a great try, but are we going to call it a success or a failure? Let me be very clear though. I am super excited to see all this happen, and I'm very much on board with this happening, provided that it is done correctly. And that's the key. I appreciate you sticking around this long. Don't forget to hit like. Let's close out with our ever popular quote of the day. By the way, I post up virtually all these quotes of the day in my post section. So if you click on the channel, like little picture icon of me, click on that, and then if you scroll to the right, you see a section that says posts. If you click on that, I actually post something every single day for folks. I'm choosing them because a lot of you guys preferred them over many others. So this one comes from noted Chinese thinker philosopher Zhang Zhou, who said, quote, "You cannot discuss the ocean with a well frog. He's limited by the space he lives in. You cannot discuss ice with a summer insect. He's bound to a single season." And sometimes it seems like you cannot discuss little pesky things like evidence, truth, logic, and history with anti-gunners. But I'll keep trying for now. We appreciate you sticking around. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this one, please feel free to check out some of our other great content, and we'll see you in the next one.